Good afternoon, everyone, and thank everyone for joining us. So my name is Jill Johnson, and I manage the IT contracts team at MCS Group. And today we're going to be looking at the new normal and really whether it represents an opportunity or actually a backward step for women working in the tech sector. So really to give today some context, over the summer, pretty much since the start of lockdown, MCS Group was running a series of online virtual roundtables that were predominantly aimed at people in leadership positions, and were just really to give a platform and really like an opportunity to share ideas, suggestions, challenges, and actually just to offer support to people in similar situations and going through the same challenges in terms of work. So one of the roundtable series that we ran was Women in Leadership in Tech. So these were really productive, and I definitely feel like they highlighted that everyone's having a completely different experience of lockdown, and actually that the new normal has been both, I think, an opportunity and a challenge to women working in the tech sector. So we thought we'd like to open the discussion up and dig a little bit deeper into what the new normal looks like for women in tech. So thank you all for joining. So I'm going to stop talking and invite our fantastic panel to introduce themselves. Paula, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. So my name is Paula Robinson. I am a senior business analyst at ESO. So it is a health tech firm based over in the States, so supporting fire and emergency medical services, the agencies that are providing that. And their mission is around improving community health and safety through the power of data. I actually started that job during lockdown. So I only started it back in June. I made the decision that blows everyone's mind to change jobs during all of this. But I don't regret it for a second. So prior to this, I worked at Deloitte Digital as a manager in Deloitte Digital. So supporting their large-scale digital projects, predominantly in the FS market, specifically around digital business banking, which is a pretty huge market at the minute. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me.
Brilliant, thank you. And Rasha?
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Hi, everybody. So my name is Rasha Cunningham. I am the head of advanced analytics for Liberty Insurance Western Europe. So many of you are familiar with Liberty IT, who are internal IT partners for the insurance group, and I work as part of the insurance group itself. So I've been with Liberty for about 6 years and have worked my way from being an analyst, a data scientist in the team, up to managing the Ireland teams. And then now, most recently, I was promoted after I came back from maternity leave in April, and started as the head of Western Europe for advanced analytics.
And Joan.
Hi everyone, my name is Joan Breen. I'm a software engineering manager at HHA Exchange, and I, like Paula, started that during lockdown as well. So yeah, I've been in this role now 4 months, and HHA, they're an American-based company, FDI in Belfast as well, and they specialize in home care providers in America, the software to links payers with providers and patients, and we're developing the platform for that in Belfast. Prior to this, I did have a little bit of a break over lockdown, where I decided to change jobs before lockdown actually happened, and the job I had actually got deferred. So I had a little dabble in a startup, of just create my own startup for a while. So I still have that. It's just on hold at the minute while I've started the new job, and I've been focusing very much on it. But I might go back to that maybe whenever the learning curve leveled out in this job. So we'll see what happens.
Brilliant, thanks. Okay, well, suppose to get started, I'm really keen to hear really what your own, I think we've kind of touched on this anyway, but what your own sort of specific experiences have been of that move to the new normal. Have there been any sort of particular challenges that you've sort of faced yourself, and what kind of way have you gone about managing those? Who's happy to kick us off?
I can start it.
Yeah, perfect.
So I've kind of already mentioned that I changed jobs during this, so it's a bit of a tale of two halves for me. So I guess I've had different experiences and faced different challenges in each of those. I think if I was looking at when lockdown started, I was in my previous job. Actually, I think probably the biggest, or one of the biggest challenges for me, was supporting other people, because as a manager and kind of at that senior level, suddenly that responsibility was on me to ensure that in the midst of a crisis, everyone was okay, and to make sure that they had the right support and everything that they needed. And actually trying to do that all while doing my day-to-day job and still meet all the deadlines that I still needed to meet. And actually that really increased my workload quite a lot. And also it's quite a lot to deal with, to try and make sure that you are giving the right level of support to people and that they are okay, all while trying to navigate your own way through it. Like that's tricky. I guess the way I approached it was I just tried to arm myself with all the information. So making sure that I knew all the policies and programs that we had in place, what resources were available to everyone, and actually then just making that available to them, letting them know these are all the things that you can access and here's where they all are, acting more as a signpost, I guess. So that, yeah, that helped, divert some of that. You're almost kind of, in a way, delegating that out. I think the other challenge, and I guess looking at a positive in this, was prior to this, we were a regional office. And one thing I was struggling with a little bit was that sense of belonging. And it was starting to erode a little bit for me because, we were feeling a bit disconnected. But once we went into lockdown, actually, suddenly the presence of that of our senior leadership team was just exploded. They were everywhere. They were talking to us all the time, and we had access to them. I was able to talk to them, and I saw that as a really, really great positive outcome of it. Moving to ESO, I guess the first challenge was getting started and onboarding. And yes, there are challenges in that, but I mean, the best way to approach it, I felt, was just to throw myself into it, totally embrace it. If you don't go in with that mindset, yeah, it's going to be hard. But actually, I found it absolutely fine, and everyone was very welcoming. And a lot of if you've got anyone joining during this, a lot of it comes from how much you can do for them, and you've got to support them just as much as you've got to throw yourself into it. And then I think the other kind of challenge I have found, moving back to doing much more focus on product design, I've had to try and kind of navigate around the issues of trying to collaborate virtually. Previously, that was just an always kind of everyone into rooms together and doing that. And now suddenly all those resources are taken away from you. And so trying to just find ways of doing that. And I'm trying to do that at the same time as setting up a new team. So really it was a challenge for everyone. So at least we were all in the same boat. But yeah, it was just really trying. It's a bit of trial and error, to be honest, and experimenting with each other and being open to trying those different things and trying new tools that some may find useful and others might not. But we've got to just all be in it together and support each other through it.
Perfect. And Sinead has just joined us there. Hi, Sinead. How are you?
Hi, everybody.
Do you want to give us just a kind of a brief introduction to yourself as well, Sinead?
Sure. Thanks, Jill. Apologies, I was a bit late. I'm Sinead Heverin. I'm a Director of Engineering in Puppet. Been with Puppet for almost 3.5 years. Previous to that, I've worked with Paula. Hi, Paula.
Hi.
Good to see you. It's a small world, isn't it, in Belfast?
I know.
So that's good, but it's a village. So previous to that, I was in Visa then for about 4.5-5 years as an engineering director as well. Sort of all my background, I guess, is predominantly fintech industry, outside of Puppet, which is kind of DevOps product-based company. And so I guess kind of really coming out of the back of the work I did in Visa, I thought there was a good opportunity to, from a tech stack perspective, to go into, I guess, kind of the sort of harder edge of direct product development and dealing with kind of customers more publicly as well. So that's me.
Perfect. So we were just talking through what everyone's own sort of specific experiences have been of lockdown and kind of that move to the new normal. Rasha, how have you kind of found the move?
Yeah, so it was a little bit different for me because I was just coming back from maternity leave in April time, like I said. So it wasn't a bad way to come back from maternity, I have to say. I can't comment on what it's like to be a working parent prior to all this lockdown, but while I was on maternity, an opportunity like a promotion came up in work, and I'd kind of nearly written myself out of even applying for it, because I kind of figured there'd be a lot of, it's a European role, so I thought there'd probably be a lot of travel, and was I in the right place where I wanted to be away from home an awful lot more so than I was beforehand. And luckily I had a conversation with my mum who kind of convinced me to say, you know, apply for it, and if you're the right person for the job, you can work the logistics out. And so I did, and I got it, and I started with a new role when I came back in April, and like all of this had happened by this point. So I've started in my new job in April time, and have been able to, initially we were working from home, so my daughter, who was 10 months at the time, was at home with us, and we both worked full time, so that was probably the biggest challenge then, I would say. And then her nursery opened in May time, which we were very, very grateful for, and she settled really well, so that's been really good. So it's been good to be able to be at home, not have to worry about travel. But I would say as well, like some of the challenges that Paula was referencing, particularly with starting a new job where you really have to like foster a lot of new connections and like relationships with stakeholders. Mine are all in different countries from what I've worked with before, so that's been a challenge. Keeping in touch with my new team members, like even getting to know my new team members as well. Making sure everybody's well supported. And so I think those are the challenges, but I have to say that like Liberty have been pretty good about things like we've had a work from home scheme. There's lots of like well-being activities that happen, and like the managers tend to be really, really good at keeping in touch with their teams and making sure that everybody's okay. I would say kind of generally, like personally, the biggest challenge is, and like every working parent at the minute is going to face this. So we're getting into this situation now where things come up on your childcare, whatever it might be, school, nursery, whatever, it just isn't available for maybe 2 weeks, which has happened to us. So everything kind of seems to level off for a little while. You're just kind of about coping with all your various responsibilities, and then this happens, and you don't have any childcare. You're balancing everything between, say, myself and my partner, looking after my daughter, working late into the evenings, and then like that 2 weeks finishes, you go back to normal for a bit, and then there's always the worry that it'll happen again. So I'd say personally that's probably been one of the biggest challenges for me, is that suddenly things seem to start feeling a little bit normal, and then it all changes again. But it's been good too, because I think prior to being a working parent, I know I wouldn't have had the empathy for other people that I work with who were going through the same thing. So it's nice to work with other people who, like, it's not nice that they're going through the same thing, but it's nice to have other people to talk to you about it. And if you say, look, I'm sorry, I have to move this meeting because my daughter Erin's here, and she's 16 months now, and she's like, I can't chat to you, I'm sorry, can I talk to you later on? People are really understanding, I think, because everybody's in the same kind of place. So I think there's lots of challenges, like particularly relating to for people having children at home and still trying to meet their work commitments. But overall, there is a bit of an ethos of like, we're all in this together. And I think that's been really helpful.
Brilliant. And Joan, what about you? Has your experience been sort of different?
I'd say it's been fairly similar. I've had quite a few comic moments of like kind of similar to the guy in the BBC where the kids come in the background and just like ask really stupid questions, or they're like, who's that guy, mommy? And they're like, it's like you're in a meeting with the CTO, and like they'll just come in and go like wave and just like derail the whole conversation. But I think the transparency, so like whenever the first week that I joined, like the nurseries weren't open, so I had the 3 of them in, and people just accepted it. And I think there was other people who were in the same boat, and there's other people who had teenagers, and I think everyone was very welcome and very accommodating. And it is quite funny whenever, especially with the senior people like the CTO and the CEO, and when you're in the meetings with those people, and you can hear their children and their dogs, the amount of dogs that go absolutely nuts as soon as someone has to speak on a conference call is unbelievable. But I think it's great now, because everyone's just so accepting of that before, whereas before maybe I would have felt, I would have been very self-conscious of my kids coming in and going like, who's that, mommy? And like, I want a biscuit. And like, I would have got very like apologetic and very, flustered over it. But now it's just like, it's just like, okay, yeah, in a wee minute, and it's just back to business kind of thing. Like, and I think that's a good thing, I think, that has come out of it. And you kind of you have a better sense now, I think, of people as a whole, and what, because you're getting to see snapshots now into people's lives where they're working in the different parts of their house, or and I think that has kind of helped with building up relationships as well. That maybe we wouldn't have saw that side of people before previously. And certainly with joining the new job, like I've been trying very hard to kind of get one-to-ones with people and try and really build up that empathy and that relationship. And I think being transparent about, okay, well, I'm finding this tough, and and understanding what everyone's situation was. And that was the biggest learning, I think, for me whenever I joined, was like, we've 20 people in our office, and I had one-to-ones with everyone, and there was such a variety of people who were, young ones who were on their own and couldn't go to the pub with their friends anymore, and were really struggling with it being, just loneliness, and having no one to talk to. And then you had, like, equally other people who were, newly stay-at-home, or new parents that had newborns, and it was great for them, because it just meant even just simple things of, like, being able to hold the baby for their wife while she could go to the bathroom for 5 minutes just made big differences. And it was just the range of other challenges that everyone else was experiencing was so different. But I think there's been a lot of benefits, but I think there has been struggles as well, such as the collaboration. I think is the biggest one, where people are trying to make a point, and you could have just drew it on a whiteboard previously. And also then with, you lose so much in body language and different forms of communication. You've had to kind of really learn how to interpret things, I think, a little bit more, put more effort into that. So I think previously, whenever, especially you've got 50 people on a call, like, there's a lot of stuff can be missed, and you have to be very careful of making sure everyone gets a chance to speak as well. Like, so there's been a lot of those sort of things, but I think they're definitely improving, and they're getting better, I think, as people are getting more and more used to this way of working.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Sinead, what about you? Have you had something different from your side or your experiences?
No, I think there's probably a bit of all of the above. I think there's a range of challenges, and part of, I think, leadership is about actually recognizing the different challenges that people are experiencing, that they're having to face. Some of it is, where you've had key workers in the house, and obviously that's having a huge stressful impact in terms of kind of safety, in terms of what people are doing alongside, people who are at home, people who are starting out in their career, versus, people who've, have very young children or have had the battles of homeschooling. And I think they all, I guess, have come in different shapes and sizes. There have been, but I think, it's like everything, I guess. It's not all doom and gloom, but either there are some opportunities to seize, I think, with it. And I think certainly from a personal perspective for me, I think it's trying to find the balance between, what are the things that you miss about not being in the office versus what are actually, the huge benefits that you have from greater flexibility. And I think kind of it is changing possibly the mindsets of how we engage, but also where we engage. And I think then, adjusting kind of, I guess, to a different style of working, and a different kind of way of how we show up. From a puppet perspective, we look at, we have kind of strong interface across multiple different global offices. So one of the benefits for that has been removing the siloed conversations that happen, after the meeting sometimes in offices. So everyone's on Zoom, and everybody's on it can at times, I think, create a more level playing field. And I think that's been a big positive with it. Where it has been difficult, I think, is just, I think maybe Paula certainly had alluded to that, maybe starting a new job, onboarding new people has been a bit more difficult, because, you miss all of that sort of direct social engagement. So I think you're having to make more of an effort to try to build that in. And it's not impossible, but it does take longer, I think, to do that. And, getting smart about sort of how you engage and where you engage then is key, and not making it all about sort of Zoom and work conversations, actually having some social conversations there with it as well, I think have been key. But overall, I think sort of the way I look at it is, this is given us, I guess, a good insight to how do we actually take the best of both worlds and come up with a more hybrid approach of how we actually kind of, spend our working week. We don't need to be in the office and all the time, but we know where there are sort of some gaps that build. And I think kind of having sort of the best of both ultimately will be some of the biggest benefits, I think, that this drives for us.
Brilliant. Okay. So then that's obviously lockdown and the new normal on a very personal kind of a basis. But I suppose if you look at the wider narrative, there's one argument that would actually suggest that the new normal, overall has actually leveled the playing field for women who are working in the tech sector, and it can actually be seen as quite an opportunity maybe for more women to enter the tech sector as well. Do you think there's any positives that maybe can be drawn from the situation in that respect? Anyone?
Is that correct?
Whoever they like.
Yeah. Well, yes, I think there are. Yeah. I think kind of sometimes kind of the loudest person in the room can dominate a meeting when you're in person, and I think it's a little bit harder to do that, I think, over Zoom. While you do get that sort of disruption and interference of people, talking over each other, and I think we certainly had that for a while. But after a few weeks of it, we got better at actually using the tooling within products like that to help a bit more etiquette, and also actually to be more efficient in terms of making sure you have agendas and there's a purpose to the calls, and actually trying to get a bit more discipline that way in terms of not having kind of a meeting for the sake of having a meeting. So I do think kind of it has driven some benefits that way. Yes.
Brilliant. And then maybe Paula, I suppose, what do you think? Do you feel like it maybe has offered a more level playing field to women who are trying to enter the tech sector?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with what you said there, Sinead. Yeah, it did take a little bedding in period for everyone to get used to it. But yeah, it's totally given people a voice. And that was certainly something I had struggled with previously. But yeah, because everyone now has to be totally present in those calls and completely engaged, suddenly everyone is listening to each other and taking the time to hear each other. And it's great that people get that voice now. But I think there's other great things that I've started to see. And I mean, for me, in my previous job, I was traveling extensively. So I was traveling every week, 4 days a week. And that was starting to take its toll. And I wasn't enjoying that anymore. And I know that there's plenty of other people that are in a similar position. And that's even more challenging for mothers and caregivers, that actually they don't have that same privilege that they're able to do that. And that option isn't there. And now suddenly that closes doors to quite a lot of opportunities. But I think now in this new kind of virtual world, those doors are open again to them. Actually, those opportunities are not available to them. And I know a friend, for example, that when she came back from maternity leave, it's kind of a bit of a similar story we were talking about at the start of this, but came back from maternity leave and went for promotion. This was pre-COVID, and she didn't get it. And the feedback she got was, well, we hadn't seen you in the role enough. You hadn't been doing it. And she was like, well, but I can't find those roles because I work part-time, and on the days that I do work, it would be a really long commute for me to be able to get to those opportunities or those projects that have those opportunities available to me. And so she really, really was struggling with that. And now actually, suddenly everything's available. The same opportunities that are available to others are now available to her. So I think we need to hold on to the momentum of that. You need to not let go of that we will eventually end up back in offices, but employers need to really hold on to that. And I think it opens up opportunities for them to also increase diversity in their hiring. If now women are able to take on those roles that they couldn't previously, it also allows them to open up, looking beyond their own region. They can now hire from anywhere. It's not limited anymore. So I think there's a lot to really take from it. I've seen resistance to remote working in the past, a lot of it, and it's something I've been trying to champion for years now. And suddenly we've been able to do the world's biggest experiment in it, and it's proof that we can do it. And yeah, just I hope it continues, and I hope employers see that benefit and run with it.
Brilliant. And Rasha or Joan, do you have something you'd like to add as well?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rasha.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. So I think a lot of it's been covered, but like the travel aspect is definitely something. There's such little need, obviously, now to be physically present for something, and it does open up much more opportunities, I think, for people who would have at-home commitments or who just doesn't want to be away from home a lot of the time. Which, if we're looking at caregivers, is more likely to be women. And so flexibility now is a norm instead of like a taboo that people have to like request. And so, it's much more normal for people to be at home, logging on in the mornings, dropping their kids, coming back, logging back on, doing your work, taking your lunch break when you need to might be like, early in the morning, late in the evening, whatever it needs to be. So, and it's more often women asking for those flexible work arrangements, and who lots of have ended up working part-time as a result of needing that flexibility. So I think there's more of an opportunity for women who want to work full-time but haven't been able to because of commitments at home, which meant they had to be part-time. You know, if they had a long commute into an office and they had to do like drop-offs at school or nursery or whatever it might be in the morning and evening, there's an opportunity, I think, for them to be able to revise those working arrangements with their employer and get back to full-time work if that flexibility is there for them, which is, it's so important for like the long-term financial health of women generally. And so if people want to work part-time, like totally fine. But if people have felt forced into that situation in the past because employers haven't been able to give them the flexibility that they need, then I think there's a real opportunity here for women to start to like take advantage of that, and anybody who's kind of in part-time but doesn't necessarily want to be there long-term.
Brilliant, yeah. And Joan, have you anything else that you want to add as well?
Yeah, the only thing I would add, like I completely agree with what everyone said, but I suppose on a very personal level, just even the fact that I'm working from home now means that, you know, in between meeting, I could run down and switch on the oven for when and have it warming by the time that my husband comes home with the children from daycare. And like, whereas before, like I generally finish my last meeting, like I do a lot of meetings with Americans, so by the time I finish in those meetings, you're talking 5:30, and they're already home at that stage. But it only takes like a minute just to say hello to them. Whenever they come in the door, they'll go off and watch, you know, CBeebies for half an hour, finish up with meetings, and you know, by then the oven has heated. The husband's already shoved in the dinner or whatever, and like it's just these simple things like I wave them bye-bye in the morning, and then I'm straight on to like stand-up call. Whereas before I couldn't have done that because I would have needed to have left like an hour and a half beforehand to commute into Belfast. So it's just these simple practical things like, you know, at lunchtime I'll maybe take, you know, eat my lunch, but I'll maybe take, you know, 10-15 minutes just to clean up the house, or, you know, to get a couple of wee jobs done that just you would have had to have been doing late into the night. And I think, you know, as a side effect of that, because you're not trying to cram so much more in whenever you finish work, I've actually been getting more sleep, and then when you get more sleep, then you're actually be able to perform better, and you're actually able to function better. And it's a lot of little marginal gains that you just don't think of, but they all kind of add up. And it's only now I really notice it, because like you're like, when you think about it, and I know everybody has different commutes, but I would have a commute like an hour and a half, so in the morning and out again in the afternoon, and like when you add up that's like a huge time saving. I've just been able to get so much more done, and so I don't miss that at all, I'll be completely honest.
So yeah, there are obviously a lot of positives and things there, and ways that women can really benefit from the new normal. But I think as well, there's an opposing view that suggests that it's actually women in tech who are more adversely affected than their male counterparts as a result of the new normal. Is that something that you would sort of agree or disagree with? And Rasha, do you want to take that one?
Sure, yeah, so there's been some pretty damning statistics, unfortunately. So the IMF released a report recently on their like World Economic Outlook, and they looked at the impact of the lockdowns, the mobility on men and women. And women's mobility was more restricted at times as the school closures, which kind of alluded to less of them were either going out to work or more mobile because they had more they have more commitments from a childcare perspective at home. So they actually called out in their report to say that overall for women globally, they're concerned about long-term employment opportunities for women, and called for governments to make some policy intervention related to this. So that's pretty foundational. And so I think everybody knows, like anecdotally, that women generally are bearing the brunt of these kind of childcare and family commitments at home, while things like schools have been closed, or they're home for 2 weeks for quarantine or whatever it might be. And I don't say it's necessarily the case for every single household, but I think on average that certainly is the case. So I think that probably, if more women are availing of things like the furlough schemes, and if more are being made redundant as a result of some of the economic situations that we're in, because they've been less able to be present in work over the last while, I think it's going to be a trend for women in general. But what it'll mean for the tech sector is that gap will just continue to widen. And one of the key things I think as well for the tech sector is too that it's so important to have like role models that you can look up to in senior positions to say, you know, if she can do it, like maybe I can someday. And if they aren't there, And if there's not enough women kind of working through the industry and getting into those more senior positions, the more that happens, the less likely women are to stay. And if you work and you consistently are the only woman in the virtual room or the physical room that you're in, eventually that does degrade on people. And some people stick it out, and others decide that it's just not for them and do a career change. So I think that there needs to be some like investment here to make sure that women are staying in the industries that they're in, that they have the flexibility they need to be able to get to their work arrangement, but like to actually be able to work, and that there's not these kind of long-term adverse effects that like the statistically is being predicted at the minute.
Yeah, and Paula or Sinead or Joan, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I read an article recently as well that was saying, as a stat, something along the lines of like, no, this was over in America, that 1 in 4 women are looking to downsize their career or leave the workforce altogether, and that's huge. 1 in 4, it's huge. And if we start to, and actually quite a lot of those were also at the senior level, and to some of the points that you've made, actually, yeah, if we start to lose those women at that level, you're losing that support. They're more often than not, they're the people that are going to champion those employee-friendly policies and programs, and they're the ones that are probably more likely to share that information for people to be made aware of it. And they're also more likely to be mentors and, as I say, the sponsors of our future female leaders. If we start to lose those, and if we start to lose other people at other levels, we also start to lose those future women. And as you say, that gap gets bigger and bigger. But I think the other kind of big thing I've seen people, or women certainly, really worry about is how they're perceived. Are they not doing enough? Are they not trying hard enough? Because they're also trying to juggle childcare or whatever care they're having to give. And if they're taking on that increased stress, and it's causing burnout, it's causing anxiety, because they are then worried, well, am I not being seen to do a good enough job? Am I not being seen to do enough? And therefore, am I more likely to be the first person to be furloughed, and worse, the first person to be made redundant? And that's just a lot of pressure to be putting on individuals. And yeah, I think a lot of this lies with the employers to look at, well, what can they do to help them, and how can they support them? And we probably do need to be reviewing what our existing policies are, particularly around kind of flexibility, and how do we make that way of working more sustainable to support it. Yeah, I think there's going to have to be a lot of action taken to see how we can reinvent that.
Brilliant. And Sinead, have you something you'd like to add as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely support all the comments. I think it has been challenging. I know certainly from a personal perspective, homeschooling has been interesting. There's been a few days where I've had to catch myself on when I got deeply frustrated with the fact that, my son would not put, a dot on top of an I, or would refuse to kind of, do his comprehension or whatever. So, within that, there's been definitely some frustrating moments, but there's also been some brilliant moments. And I think you realize that you're, maybe not needed all the time, but it's been lovely to kind of be here when they have needed you. So from that perspective, that's where there are the silver linings to kind of grab onto now, and I think really drive that positive message in terms of diversity. Because I think kind of, it depends on what sector, we're talking about. We're obviously all tech, but there is no doubt about it, the demographic, is skewed to certain genders depending on the sector you're in. So the reality is, there are some sectors, if we look at things like hospitality, where you possibly have maybe more females, they're hugely impacted from a financial perspective and also from an opportunity perspective in the future. So there's huge concerns there from an economic perspective, but where we can, I guess, from a tech sector, do some real good is highlight where the flexibility is actually driving huge advantage and actually huge opportunity to be able to sort of build on that and to promote that, to say, look, maybe you hadn't thought about this as a career before, but actually, here's how we show up, here's how we actually sort of, work every day, here's how we engage. And perhaps we could actually I'm not saying close the gap. I don't think it will take a very long time, but there might be some silver shoots, some green shoots in there, I guess, in terms of, maybe we can be offering opportunity to people who might not have considered, a career in tech, because like, from my perspective, like, 23 odd years out of college now, and like, it was the best decision I ever made in terms of, the travel I've got, the opportunities I've got, the development, and meeting different people of all walks of life, and being able to kind of build a huge bank of personal friends, and who you take with you for life. So I think from that perspective, it is about trying to counteract sort of what has been some big challenges, I think, for women, but also emphasizing kind of look at it, there are some great benefits kind of to the sector that we work on. As long as schools and nurseries being open, I think, is key. That's really been the big dividing line that I saw. And I do see that reflected, like, in our male counterparts as well. And that balanced with then sort of mental health, I think, is the other piece, and that's cross-gender. From my perspective, I don't think it's, just kind of from a female perspective as well, because yes, we do tend to, drift towards kind of being the carers, but I think kind of, there's people experiencing the pandemic in different ways, and being on your own is also a challenge as well. So, and I think the gender piece on that is almost kind of irrelevant at that point. So.
Well, yeah, I suppose there's a massive focus really actually on mental health in the male population as well. So definitely would agree with you in that respect. And Joan, what about yourself?
Yeah, I just would like to add sort of with all that is I think we also need to make it more acceptable for men to be okay, but and just not always assume that it's women that are the primary caregivers, because I know this has really upset my husband quite a few times, where he's been out in the supermarket with especially whenever the twins were quite small, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're babysitting today," and he's like, "No, they're my children. I'm not babysitting. Like, I am their father and I look after them." And like, it's just subtle things like that there, where people just automatically assume, oh well, obviously the wife's going to go on furlough, whenever they may have, but maybe that's not the best situation. And like, I know of quite a few people where it's actually been the husband who has made the choice to go on furlough and done, and really enjoyed it, and enjoyed the time at home with the children, and are now questioning, well, do they actually really want to go back to their job? Do they really, they've actually really enjoyed the whole homeschooling, and now they're feeling like, if I don't go back, are people going to, think work? And it's the same thing, except just on, just the men feeling the same thing. And like, I know I just had a few friends who are saying that to me, and they're like, "Is this what it's like for you? I now get it." And equally, like, it's even just like it's maybe less of a thing now, because obviously a lot of the baby classes and stuff aren't happening, but I thoroughly always noticed it at any of the baby massage or anything, where there was the only daddy there with the child, and nobody would talk to him, and nobody would go over and mix with him, and they'd be all like inviting the mummies all off to go and do coffee. So I always would have really made a point of going over and chatting and making sure he was just as included as everybody else, because for some reason everyone just seemed to kind of, because he was a guy, just didn't seem to involve him in the same way. And that always really bugged me, because we have to do it for both. You can't just focus on the situation for females and ignore the daddies who are very much wanting to be just as much a father to their children, and get that time and get that opportunity to do that, and be respected and treated for it as well, and for it not to be detrimental to them either. Because I think that's a personal one for me, because I've quite a few people that I've seen it on the other side of the fence as well, where they're trying to be the good parent and getting reprimanded for it, and people just making assumptions that that they're not doing what they should be doing. So yeah.
Okay. And I think my next question we've kind of touched on anyway in the answers to the previous question, but in terms of the new normal and the lockdown, what kind of longer term effects do you kind of see there in terms of the gender gap in the tech sector? Rasha, do you want to go with that one?
Yeah, I think and Joan's point's really good as well. So like, the long-term effects could be if there's not enough women will stay in the industry, and that's definitely been proven, I think, time and time again. But what we might see as well is a shift around those household responsibilities, a little bit more of those family commitments, and maybe there's more of an opportunity for women to like progress and stay in the industry because their partners, their husbands, whoever it might be, have decided that the new normal isn't for them. Maybe they don't want to be part of the working world necessarily anymore. They want to take it, a forward step. So long term, you could certainly be concerned about women role models here to kind of look up to and drive those policies and drive the change that really needs to be here for us all. But maybe it does, like we said, kind of start to level that playing field a little bit, gives more opportunity for other people to be involved in some of the commitments that women have, and maybe they might be able to progress a bit more.
Yeah. And would anyone else like to sort of respond to that?
I think we've touched on a lot of them today already, and yeah, I think one of the biggest risks is losing some of our females from the workforce, and the knock-on effect that has, and on doing all that great work we've done to try and help with gender diversity. But I think actually we will see companies make significant investments to build a more kind of flexible workplace, and I do think they'll review their policies, and I do think this whole experience has helped humanize everybody and on both sides of the, male and female, and yeah, I think and I hope that it allows everyone to look at that differently and see that as an opportunity and run with it.
Very good. And Sinead or Joan, would you like to add anything as well, just to that one?
Yeah, for me, I think kind of, well, there's nothing to hide on Zoom. We take our whole self to work every day, but not as obviously so until this has happened. So Joan's point about, the disruptors, those wee faces at the door and stuff like that have came in, I think we've all had those moments, and it was so funny and cringeworthy when the BBC News reporter sketch went out. We were, there was lots of, alternative versions of that with the woman, if it had been a female news reporter that happened to. But yeah, I mean, I think kind of it's more obvious now, I think, what people's whole self is and the commitments they have. And I think from that perspective, there will be a deeper appreciation. I know I have it in terms of kind of my teams, what people are battling outside of the day job, and actually how amazing they are and how committed they are to the job, that they're able to cope with so many other things that are going on. So I think kind of coming out of this, I feel an immense sense of gratitude for for the company I work for, the flexibility it's given me, and how do we build on that flexibility to strike a balance? Because we always talk about the whole, is it possible to have it all? And not every day, I don't think it is, and I don't know if that's, for me personally, I don't think that's a realistic goal, but I do think kind of there are definitely glimpses there of where just having better balance and a better sense of what's important, and staying true to your values and trying to strike that balance between, being a good committed person in your home, whether that be through being a parent, in your relationships, with your family, with your friends, alongside showing up as being a committed employee who's doing their best every day. So I think for me, kind of the flexibility piece is the bit that we need to really drive. And I think, in terms of kind of the gender gap, I think you can only then you've got real examples of that now where you can actually emphasize that even more and try our best to actually get that into schools and start at younger ages to be able to promote just the possibilities, I guess, of coming into this sector. Because I still think that's where ultimately the issues are, is trying to get that attraction at younger ages whenever kids are making their, exam choices and being able to get influence there more and more. I think that's going to be key. But we've got some brilliant real life examples of coming through a pandemic and how, tech has actually been probably, one of the best, I guess, sectors to be working in, because you can do your job anywhere. And that's been fantastic. So I think the more we can promote that, the better.
Brilliant. Okay. And Joan, back to you.
I'm just kind of hoping that there's like a subtle revolution as well kind of happening with, I think there's a lot of people like, and I suppose I kind of got a glimpse of it with the sort of the little startup side business that I did, that there does seem to be a lot of females starting their own little side businesses where, they're just, they've realized now how they're wanting to work, and like maybe it's just a lot of the people I follow on Instagram and things like that there, where people are they're being their own bosses because it suits them and they can make it work for themselves and how they want to work. And I'm hoping that there'll be, that we'll see more of that, and people, and not just for females but for males as well, where people they'll make things work for them and they'll figure out a way to make it work for them, and it'll be then up to employers. And I think most employers will be appreciative of it as well, where they'll be flexible and they'll adjust things, and things will just, it'll even out and it'll pan out. And I think there'll be like, you always hear the joke about in 20, 30 years time we're going to witness the rise of the quarantine babies will be coming up, but there'll be a surge. I think there'll be a similar thing of like startups and like wonderful creative opportunities that have just bubbled up through people being forced into it, through being made redundant or being put in furlough, and they've just been given that time to kind of take a step back, really look at everything and come up with new ideas and new things. So I'm very hopeful that there's just going to be a surge of like just stuff that we've never seen before that's just going to kind of bubble up, and people just being happy and how they work and being more clear about what they want as well, and embracing it.
A surge of babies and startups. I suppose like my last question for you all is really, what advice do you have for women in tech, really, about balancing work and balancing, I think we sort of said that it is kind of usually the women that bear the brunt of the sort of the home commitments and the home responsibilities. So what kind of advice would you have for women in tech about balancing both of those during the new normal? Paula or Rasha, do you just want to jump in?
I think in this instance, honesty is the best policy, and over communicating is probably a good thing. I think my advice is really just to kind of go and speak to whoever your manager is, or if you're also managing other individuals, to talk to them about, well, what schedule actually works for you. Have that conversation and talk about it and put it on the table as of this is my proposal, this is the schedule I'd like to work to, and be honest about how much capacity you have and what you can take on, and you can agree that together and agree what success looks like for you and for them on both sides, and then exactly what you're working to and being clear on what your responsibilities are, and that will allow you to then focus your efforts. And I think when you agree that, share that with your colleagues as well. Share that with people in your team so everyone's aware of that. And I would leverage the tools that are available to you. We're all kind of having to use Slack and Teams and whatever else everyone's using. But I know if I'm going to step away from my desk, I will put a status on my Slack just so people know where I am, or if I've gone to lunch. So people always know what I'm doing when, and actually it's a really simple thing to do. And actually a colleague today emailed us all to say, I'm not going to be available on my emails or Slack for this period of time today because I need to focus on a project, but if anything's really urgent, here's my number. And I was just like, that's brilliant. More people should do that. And I really loved that she did that. And I don't see that happening enough. But yeah, I think it's just all about communication.
Perfect, brilliant. And Rasha, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I would say on the schedule aspect, for me with family commitments has been really important. Like, Joan was saying the same about being able to see her kids. Like, I'm able to give Erin breakfast every morning, and my partner takes her off to nursery, and we have bye-bye at the door. I very rarely start work before able to do that by blocking out my calendar and just letting people know I'm not available. Same again in the evening, like I get to collect her every day, bring her home, give her dinner, put her to bed, and we all get to spend like a family meal time together at least a few nights a week, which is good. So that makes all the difference. And yeah, fair enough, if something really important comes up that I really can't get away from doing at that time, then these things always happen. But I think making sure that you set those boundaries as much as you can is just so important for your work-life balance. Everybody always talks about women not taking enough me time, so, just to kind of, if you're finding you're working late into the evening, after you've spent time with family commitments, doing things with the house, whatever it might be, take a little bit of time for yourself. It might be to, watch a bit of TV or just go for a walk with the dog, whatever it might be that you can do to try and switch off a little bit. I'll do a shameless plug for our upcoming Women in Tech event. So you can always join one of those with one of the first week of December if you want, to have a bit of networking, a bit of crack with everybody and talk and meet like-minded people. And probably my last thing is to either like find those role models that you can connect with, or even just like people who that are going through the same thing, and make some time to talk to them, because you're not alone in whatever's happening here. We've talked about so many different challenges that people are facing, but everybody's facing some sort of challenge. So whoever it might be, like, find your people to have a chat to and just let them know what's going on, and you'll more often than not find that they definitely empathize with what's happening, and they'll be able to share something that's happening with them too. So I think everyone's finding this all a little bit strange. Everyone's like feeling a little bit more pressure probably than they usually would be for various reasons. So find your people to chat to and find some like-minded people, and that should make all the difference, I think.
I love that. Find your people. That's really good. And Sinead, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar. I think kind of boundaries are important. Being able to kind of say when you're available, when you're not, that's key. And I think, don't expect to be able to do it all either. We're not superheroes. So know what it's important to show up at, and know when it's okay to say no. And I think most of us should have enough common sense to be able to understand the difference between the two. And I think ask for help and lean into your network. I think a bit like what Rasha was saying. I gain a great amount of sort of support, and I think, courage and energy at times by leaning into my network of people that I trust, that I seek help, I seek coaching advice and mentoring advice from people, where there are situations that I'm not sure, or it's the first time you've hit it and you want a bit of advice. I think women definitely sometimes will, be more risk adverse and want that bit of reassurance more possibly at times. So I think using your network, definitely, and to try to gain a bit of support, I think, is essential. But setting boundaries, I think, is absolutely key. Yeah, and it's okay to do that as well. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And Joan, what advice would you have?
What's worked for me is certainly visualizing what an ideal day for me looks like and how I want the morning to go, and then your work day. And then I think once you have that visualized in your head, it's easier then to kind of schedule and kind of get. So I want my meetings to finish at this time, so then I can go get the kids and have that family time, and then you take your me time, go for a run and do those sort of things. I think it helped me visualizing what it was I wanted to do and set goals and objectives and plan how I wanted my week to go, rather than the week taking me where it wanted to go instead. And the other kind of, I suppose, practical things that really helped me was I followed the organized mum method on Instagram, where it's like you half an hour cleaning a week, and it sounds really daft, but it really worked. And it's all about doing little things consistently, and they all add up. And I've started to apply that sort of technique then in like work, with sort of like even just simple stuff like keeping on top of email and things like that there. And it's like there's like a time technique as well, like where it's just like things that got there that have just really worked for me, made my life less stressful. I think that's sometimes when things can just get overwhelming and stressful, it's a coping mechanisms of how to make things work for you, because everybody's different and everyone has different situations and different things that are important to them as well. And I think that's the important thing to remember as well. It's okay if you don't want to be the one, with the career, and it's okay to put your family first and to be that person as well. It's like, it's just a job, and it's just enough for me to get the money that I want, and actually these other things are far more important to me, just as much as it's okay that you are very much a career person and you're wanting to kind of go out there and be successful and succeed. I think both those things are okay. Everyone is so different and so individual, and I think it's important that we should celebrate that more, and it's okay for everyone to be different, and to their version of success will be very different to everybody, and we should applaud people for that more, I think, as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, folks, we have a couple of minutes left if anybody has anything they want to add before we finish up. Nope. Brilliant. Look, thank you all so much for joining us, Paula, Rasha, Sinead and Joan. A really insightful and really worthwhile, I think, personally, analysis of the new normal for women working in technology or working through kind of lockdown and the new normal. And yeah, thank you for everyone for joining us, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of Digital DNA. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
See
you.
you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.